Hi there. Welcome to a series of videos called English for Emerson. We started off with conversational English a lot on this channel, the real basics. First of all, we started with the ABCs. Then we went to some words, then we went to some questions and answers, and now we're on to sayings. What does that mean? It means there's old, familiar expressions in English that don't really necessarily make a lot of sense in terms of if you really think about it. What the heck does that mean? But they come from a time that has passed. The time that is long gone. But we still use these sayings to this day because they've become part of what you call the lexicon. They've become part of our culture, part of our language. We use these same expressions, and we're going to talk about one of those today. And that's going to be, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. I like that saying. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen, baby. That's a good saying. What does that mean? How do people use that? Well, let's say you're playing soccer, for example, and you see some guy who's really good. He goes by somebody and with the ball, and he scores a goal. And they all celebrate. And the defender, he's kind of like, he feels bad that he let the guy get by him. He's down on himself. He's kind of pouting. Maybe somebody will say to that defender, they'll say, hey, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. What does that mean? It means that's life. You're going to get scored on. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. Where does that saying come from? Well, it comes from the old times. You see, we got stoves like this nowadays. Can you see that? That's an electric stove. It's got electric controls on it that tell you how hot it is. The oven down here, it's all electric. You know exactly what the temperature is going to be because you just get on here and program it. I hit bake, then I hit start. Yeah, it's just automatic. There's no problem. It's just preheat, and then I hit cancel. That's back off again. It wasn't like that back in the old times, people. Oh, no. No. Back in the old times, you had something called a cook stove. What does that mean? It means that there was a stove in the kitchen that had a fire in it. One side of the stove was the firebox where you put wood in there and made a fire. The other side of the stove was the oven, down underneath, down under here. So one side of it would be the fire, and the other side would be the oven where you'd be doing the cooking. Then, of course, the top would be the same. The top part of the stove up on where you'd be boiling things like boiling tea and boiling coffee and boiling potatoes. Well, that would be on top of the fire. So it was a big job because you had to cut all the wood, you had to light the fire, you had to keep the fire going, and you had to keep the fire at the right temperature. Now, my grandma, Nanny, wish I had a picture of her. I'll have to find a picture of her so I can put it on the screen. Maybe I'll find one today so I can put it on the video. Anyway, she told me that when she was a kid, well, they didn't have a thermometer. Where in the heck is my thermometer? I had one sitting around here. Isn't that just something? Just when I need that thing, it's gone. This is a thermometer here. You can see that it has the gauge on there to tell what temperature is something. This is the probe. You stick it in whatever you're cooking. You can tell the temperature. Well, we have a thermometer on the stove, but they didn't have that on those old cook stoves. They didn't have a thermometer on the stove. So what did she do to tell the temperature? She just opened up the oven. She said, and her mom, Grandma Gertrude, said, okay, you just put your arm in there. And that's how you tell how hot it is. And so, Grandma Gertrude got the stove just the right temperature to let's say, make biscuits. And she said, okay, yeah, that's just right. Okay, Esther, That was my nanny's name, my grandma's name. She said, now you put your arm in there, feel it. That's the temperature that you need to be baking biscuits at or making pie, whatever. They would gauge it with their arm. Well, you can just imagine, especially during the summertime, that when it was hot outside, there was no air conditioning. They didn't have air conditioners back then. They didn't even have electricity for a long time. They certainly didn't have air conditioners. It would get extremely hot in the kitchen because you had a fire going in there. It wasn't an electronic stove. There was an actual fire going on in the stove in the kitchen, and they had no air conditioning. So the kitchen, in the summertime in particular, would get extremely hot. Because what were they doing in there? They were canning all their food to survive during the wintertime. They had to can the potatoes, had to can the tomatoes, had to can all the pears and the peaches and the apples and the plums, everything, beans, peas, corn. And how do you can? Well, you boil it. You put all the food that you're canning in a great big huge pot, big pot. And you boil it all, you cook it, and then you have to put it in jars. And then you put a lid on it and it seals it. And then you go put that in a cabinet somewhere and save it to eat it during the wintertime. That's how they survived. They didn't have a freezer. They didn't have electricity. How were they going to keep the food? Well, you had to can it. And to can it, you had to boil it. And to boil it, you had to get the stove hot. I mean red hot. You just can imagine how hot the kitchen got back in the old days in the summertime with no air conditioner and a fire going in there. I just can't even imagine. You know, people complain today, oh, all I do is cook and clean. All I do is cook and clean. Oh, bosh. You do not. You don't even do anything compared to how they did it back in the old days. That they had to go out and cut the wood, saw it, chop it up into small pieces, make the fire in the stove, and then they had to boil. They had to go pick the food, then they had to boil it, then they had to put it all in jars, and they had to do all this with no electricity and no air conditioning. No power saw. They had to cut the wood with a saw and an axe. They had to put their arm in the stove to see that it was the right temperature. If they wanted to bake a pie or bake biscuits or something, bake chicken. Good night. I mean, that's work. Today, no. No. People are lazy, but they still talk like back in the old times, and they still say, hey, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. You'll hear that expression from time to time in sports. You'll hear it if people get in an argument sometimes. People complain, you know. Oh, I don't like it the way you're talking. Well, hey, if you don't like the way I'm talking, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen, baby. Here we go. You got to have a pen. Same thing with English. Hey, if it seems too hard, hey, baby, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. But I don't really want you to get out of the kitchen. I want you to stay right in the kitchen with me. I really do. Here we go. If starts with an I, capital I. IF. You see that lowercase f is kind of like a droopy flower on the top. It's kind of like, he's kind of droopy. Lowercase f. If you we've used the word you a lot on this channel. Y-O-U. If you can't, now we know that can is C-A-N. Can. If we're going to make can't, we would do an apostrophe and then a T. Can't. Now, what's that apostrophe? I'm going to put that word up here, apostrophe. The apostrophe is this little dash right here. It takes two. So the apostrophe shortens up two words, cannot, and makes them into one, can't. I got cut off in the middle of the video again by this phone. It seems to be running out of storage. And the more I erase stuff that's stored on the phone, it doesn't seem to help. It's getting more and more grumpy with time. You know, that's technology. It gets obsolete after a couple of years, and you got to replace it. That's just life. I think that phone is headed out. If you can't take the heat, you got to get out of the kitchen. There you go. So we got can't, and now we got take. T-A-K-E. If you can't take the is going to be T-H-E. Kind of sloppy writing. If you can't take the heat, H. Starts with a. Starts with an H. Heat. H-E-A-T. Comma. If you can't take the heat, that's the first part of it. It's kind of a two-part deal, so we need a comma in there for our pause. Let's take a look at these words here. Take. That's not takey. That E on the end is silent. Now, how do we know that's going to be silent? Because there's an A before it. An A is a vowel. If there's an A in a word before the E, and the E's at the end, the E will be silent. Take. The vowels are A, E, I, O, U, and Y. I'll put them up here, vowels. Look here. We got an E at the end again, but it's not silent. It makes a sound. The. Well, there's no other vowel here. Therefore, that E at the end of the is going to make a sound. Now we got H-E-A-T. We know that the E sound can be made by a variety of different letters. In this case, it's going to be made by a E-A. It's not he-at. The E-A together can make the sound E. If you can't take the heat, get. Is G-E-T. G. G can make the sound G. Isn't that weird? Why didn't they call it a G or a G instead of a G? That's just the way it goes. The G can make several different sounds, and one of them is a G. Get. Out. O-U-T. Get out of. O-F. It's not O-V, it's O-F, even though it makes a V sound. English does not always look like it sounds. In fact, that's what happens a lot of the time. And we got the again. I'm trying to go real skinny letters here so I can fit in kitchen at the end. Sorry about the skinny letters. That's T-H-E again. The. Now we got kitchen. K-I-T. C-H-E-N. Kitchen. I just made it. I already had my period right there. There it is. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. Back in the old times, this was not a saying that was, people weren't being funny at all when they said this. They meant it because it got so hot in the kitchen in the summertime when they were canning all that food and doing all that cooking, chopping all that wood and making that fire in the stove box. It got so hot that you had to get out of the kitchen. Once you got to the point of feeling sick from the heat, hey, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. They weren't joking. You had to get out and take a break. But In today's world, we use it as a joke. Like on the basketball court, if somebody has a really good shot, shoots a basket and the defense starts pouting about it. Oh, no. Hey, they might say, hey, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. Very common saying. Is a good one in English. I hope you use it from time to time. I hope it makes sense. And that's all I got to say on English for Emerson. We'll hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.